The silence in classroom 301 at Hanshin University was deafening. The kind of silence that precedes an earthquake. 200 perfectly pressed blazers, 200 pairs of designer shoes, and exactly one pair of brown eyes that didn't belong. Kendra Johnson stood at the podium, her vintage leather notebook trembling slightly in her grip. The PowerPoint slide behind her displayed months of meticulous research. Market penetration strategies for Korean cosmetics in sub-Saharan Africa. Her voice had been steady for 20 minutes, each statistic delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Then Lee Jun-ho raised his hand. Professor Park. His voice cut through the air like broken glass. With all due respect, how can we take market analysis on African territories seriously from someone who clearly doesn't understand Korean business ethics? Scattered chuckles rippled through the room. Perhaps our exchange student should focus on markets more. Familiar to her background, the professor's eyes dropped to his desk. Kendra felt every gaze burning into her skin, every whispered Korean phrase that needed no translation. Her hands found the gold Parker pen in her blazer pocket, her father's graduation gift, her anchor in this storm. Actually, she said, her American accent suddenly feeling like armor, my research indicates that Korean beauty standards have created a $15 billion market gap in... Market gap? Junho stood now, his Rolex catching the fluorescent light. The gap is in cultural understanding. You can't analyze what you've never experienced. The laughter was louder this time, meaner. 300 kilometers away, in a glass tower that scraped Seoul's sky, Chairman Kim Tae-min watched the live feed on his wall-mounted screen. Every Hanshin University class was recorded for educational quality assurance, a policy he'd personally funded. His knuckles whitened around his coffee cup as memories crashed over him. Michigan, 1988. A younger version of himself standing before a different classroom, facing the same cruel laughter, the same dismissive eyes. The scar on his left temple throbbed, a souvenir from the brick that had followed him home that night. On screen, Kendra gathered her papers with trembling dignity. The camera caught a single tear she refused to let fall. Chairman Kim's hand moved to the red phone, the emergency line that could reshape mountains or destroy empires with a single call. He'd built his fortune on the principle that some debts transcend generations, that loyalty runs deeper than blood. Sir? His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Cancel my afternoon meetings. Kim's voice was ice over fire. And get me the Lee family's contract files. All of them. Should I inform them of the review, sir? Kim's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. Oh, they'll find out soon enough. Some people are about to learn that cruelty has compound interest. On the screen, Kendra walked toward the exit, her head high despite the whispers that followed her like hungry shadows. She had no idea that her presentation hadn't just earned her an enemy. It had awakened Korea's most dangerous protector. The red phone's dial tone hummed like a war cry. Did you know that 90% of our listeners aren't subscribed to our channel? If you're already invested in Kendra's story and want to see how a single phone call can rewrite the rules of power, hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us create more stories like this, where justice isn't just served, it's delivered with interest. Professor Park's office smelled of old books and cowardice. Kendra sat across from his mahogany desk, watching him shuffle papers like a man drowning in his own weakness. Miss Johnson, he began, his English careful and practiced. Perhaps it would be wise to reconsider your thesis topic. Reconsider? Kendra's grip tightened on her notebook. Sir, my research is solid. The data shows clear market opportunities. The data isn't the problem. Park removed his glasses, suddenly looking older than his 48 years. Hanshin University values harmony. Your presentation yesterday, it created ripples. Through the window, Kendra could see the courtyard where students clustered in their invisible hierarchies. Chibol's children gravitating toward each other like magnets, their privilege as natural to them as breathing. She was an outsider in every possible way. Her skin, her nationality, her bank account. Are you suggesting I changed my research because Lee Jun-ho was uncomfortable? Park's silence was answer enough. A soft knock interrupted the tension. Seo Minji entered, her oversized cardigan and vintage glasses making her look like a character from an indie film. She carried a tablet and wore the expression of someone who'd been listening at doors. Professor Park, you asked me to bring the exchange program evaluations? Ah, yes. Miss Seo. Perhaps you could show Miss Johnson to the library. I believe she needs to research alternative approaches. Minji's eyes met Kendra's across the desk. A flash of understanding, of alliance. Of course, Professor. Kendra, shall we? The library's marble halls echoed with their footsteps. When they were safely between the towering stacks of Korean literature, Minji finally spoke. That was brutal yesterday, even by Junho's standards. You know him? Everyone knows him. Lee Jun-ho, Crown Prince of Lee Holdings, third-generation Chaebol heir, future CEO, certified asshole. Minji's bluntness was refreshing after Professor Park's diplomatic cowardice. But here's what's interesting. Word is his family's been sweating bullets this week. What do you mean? Minji pulled out her tablet, fingers dancing across the screen. 3 major contracts canceled. Lee Holdings' stock dropped 12% in 2 days. Someone with serious power is squeezing them, and nobody knows why. A chill ran down Kendra's spine. Coincidences didn't exist in a country where every bow had meaning, where business was personal and personal was political. Minji, who has that kind of power? In Korea? Maybe 5 people. At the top of that list, she lowered her voice to a whisper. Chairman Kim Tae-min. He's like the Korean Warren Buffett, except scarier. They say he can make or break entire industries with a phone call. The gold pen in Kendra's pocket seemed to pulse against her ribs. Her father had always been vague about his time in Seoul during the 80s, deflecting questions with stories about the food and the mountains. But there were photos hidden in their attic. Pictures of a young Marcus Johnson with a Korean man whose face she'd never been allowed to see clearly. Minji, she said carefully, do you think someone could be watching out for me? In Korea, everyone's watching everyone. But protection? Minji studied her new friend's face. That would mean you're more important than you think, and that honestly scares me more than Junho's tantrum. Across campus, Lee Jun-ho sat in his father's imported German sedan, phone pressed to his ear as his world crumbled in real time. What do you mean, all the contracts? His voice cracked despite his efforts to maintain composure. Doosan, LG, Samsung. They can't all just cancel simultaneously. His father's voice was strained. They received better offers. All from the same consortium. All linked back to Kim Holdings. Kim Tae-min? But why would he? Junho's words died as yesterday's presentation flashed through his mind. The African-American girl with the determined eyes. The way she'd stood there, taking his insults like arrows to the chest. Son, did you do something stupid? The question hung in the air like smog over Seoul. Outside the car window, Hanshin University's pristine campus continued its daily dance of privilege and protocol, unaware that the balance of power had just shifted beneath their feet. Junho's hand trembled as he ended the call. For the first time in his 23 years of entitled existence, he was afraid. He had no idea that his fear was just the opening note of a symphony that would reshape everything. Kendra's studio apartment near campus was tiny, a shoebox that would have been a closet in her Los Angeles home. But it was hers, paid for with her savings and her father's cautious support. The walls were covered with research notes, market analysis charts, and a single photo. Her parents on their wedding day. Her mother's radiant smile a beacon against the faded Polaroid colors. The envelope appeared under her door at exactly 7:30 a.m., expensive paper, with the subtle watermark of an organization she'd never heard of, the Marcus Foundation. Dear Miss Johnson, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the Marcus International Excellence Scholarship. This merit-based award, covering full academic expenses plus a monthly stipend, has been established to support outstanding students who demonstrate exceptional potential in international business studies. No application was required. Your selection was based on academic performance and recommendations from faculty observers. Congratulations. You deserve this recognition. Sincerely, the Selection Committee. Kendra read the letter 3 times, her heart hammering against her ribs. Scholarships didn't just appear out of nowhere. Someone was watching her, and after Minji's warnings, that thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like vindication. Her phone buzzed. A text from Minji. Coffee? I have news about your favorite prince. The cafe near campus was crowded with the morning rush. Students clutching espresso like lifelines, professors hiding behind newspapers, the eternal dance of caffeine and academia. Minji had secured a corner table, her laptop open and expression grim. Junho's family is hemorrhaging money, she said without preamble. 4 more contracts canceled overnight. My cousin works at Lee Holdings. Says the executives are having emergency meetings every hour. Kendra slid the scholarship letter across the table. And I just received this. Minji's eyes widened as she read. The Marcus Foundation? I've never heard of... Wait. She started typing rapidly. Marcus. Oh my God. What? Marcus Foundation was established 15 years ago. Completely anonymous benefactors. But look at this. She turned her screen toward Kendra. Every single recipient has been an international student who faced some kind of discrimination or hardship. A Thai student whose research was stolen by her advisor. A Nigerian exchange student whose thesis defense was sabotaged. An Indian girl who was bullied. Kendra finished the sentence, understanding flooding through her like ice water. Whoever's behind this foundation has a very specific mission, and they've been watching you longer than you think. Across the cafe, a man in a perfectly tailored suit was reading a newspaper, his face hidden behind the financial pages. But the vintage gold Parker pen in his jacket pocket caught the light. Identical to the one Kendra carried. Identical to the one her father had treasured for over 30 years. When the girls left 20 minutes later, the man folded his newspaper and made a phone call. She received the letter, and she's starting to ask the right questions. Chairman Kim's voice was quiet on the other end. Good. Intelligence runs in the family. What about the Lee situation? Junho's father requested a meeting. He's desperate. Let him sweat another day. Some lessons require proper seasoning. That afternoon, Kendra found herself in the university's archives, deep in the basement where old yearbooks and institutional memories gathered dust. If someone was protecting her, she needed to understand why. The Marcus Foundation was too convenient, too perfectly timed. Her fingers traced through decades of Hanshin University records, looking for connections, patterns, anything that might explain her mysterious benefactor. The basement was cold, lit by harsh fluorescent strips that made everything look like a crime scene. Find anything interesting? She spun around to find Jun-ho standing in the doorway, his usual arrogance replaced by something harder to read. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. What do you want, Lee? To understand what the hell is happening to my family. He stepped closer, and she noticed the expensive cologne couldn't quite mask the scent of desperation. 24 hours after your little presentation, our world starts falling apart. That's quite a coincidence. Maybe the market just recognized bad business when it saw it. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Cut the act, Johnson. You know something. Someone is protecting you, and I want to know who. Kendra stood, her notebook clutched against her chest like a shield. Even if I knew, why would I tell you? You've made my life here miserable from day one. Because... His voice dropped to a whisper. Whoever's doing this has more power than my family. More power than most chaebols combined. That kind of protection doesn't come free. And when they're done using you, what do you think happens next? The question followed her home like a shadow, wrapping around her thoughts as she tried to sleep. Outside her window, Seoul glittered with a million lights, each one representing a life, a story, a secret. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. Daddy? Kendra, sweetheart. It's late there, isn't it? Marcus Johnson's voice carried the weight of years, of choices made and prices paid. In the background, she could hear the familiar sounds of their Los Angeles home. The grandfather clock, the evening news, the life she'd left behind to chase her dreams in a country that saw her as an outsider. Daddy, I need to ask you something. About your time in Seoul. The pause stretched across the Pacific, heavy with unspoken truths. What about it, baby girl? Did you have friends there? Someone who might want to help me now? Another pause, longer this time. When her father spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Kendra, some friendships transcend time and distance. Some debts can only be repaid through generations. If someone is looking out for you in Seoul, he took a shaky breath, then you're safer than I ever dared hope. What does that mean? It means, baby girl, that the past has a way of protecting the future, and you are more loved than you could possibly imagine. After they hung up, Kendra lay in the dark, her father's words echoing in her mind. The scholarship letter sat on her desk like a promise and a threat. Outside, Seoul never slept. And somewhere in its glittering maze, powerful people were playing a game with her life as the prize. She had no idea that 300 kilometers away, Chairman Kim Tae-min was staring at a decades-old photograph. Two young men in graduation caps, one black, one Korean, both grinning at a future they thought they understood. The game was just beginning, and the stakes were about to get deadly. The LG building's 57th floor was a temple to modern power, glass and steel reaching toward heaven, the city sprawling below like a circuit board. Lee Jun-ho's father, CEO Lee Dong-wook, sat across from Chairman Kim Tae-min, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. Chairman Kim, Lee Dong-wook began, his voice carefully modulated. Our families have had a beneficial relationship for over a decade. Surely we can resolve whatever misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Kim's voice was silk over steel. The scar on his temple seemed more pronounced in the harsh conference room lighting. Your son humiliated a young woman in front of her entire class. A young woman under my protection. With respect, sir, we weren't aware. Of course you weren't aware. Kim rose from his chair, moving to the floor-to-ceiling window that offered a godlike view of Seoul. Your son believes his birthright grants him the right to crush others for entertainment. Where do you suppose he learned that behavior? Lee Dong-wook's face flushed. In Korean corporate culture, Such directness was tantamount to a slap. "Chairman Kim, if you would simply tell us what restitution..." Restitution. Kim turned, and something in his expression made the older man shrink back. 37 years ago, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I stood where that girl stands now. Different classroom, same hatred, same cruel laughter. The room went dead silent except for the whisper of climate control. A brick followed me home that night, split my scalp open, left me bleeding on foreign soil. But someone found me. A young black man who could have walked away, who should have walked away. Instead, he carried me to the hospital, stayed until dawn, gave blood when mine wasn't enough. Kim's hand touched the scar, and for a moment, the billionaire mask slipped, revealing the wounded student he'd once been. That young man's name was Marcus Johnson. The girl your son chose to humiliate is his daughter. Lee Dong-wook went pale. In Korea, debts of honor were sacred, transcending generations and wealth. Chairman Kim, we had no idea. No, you didn't. Because people like you never look beyond the surface. You see skin color, accent, economic status, and you think that's the whole story. Kim returned to his seat, his movement predatory. Marcus Johnson saved my life. More than that, he gave me the strength to become who I am. Every success I've achieved, every company I've built, carries his fingerprints. What do you want from us? Kim's smile was winter sunshine, beautiful and deadly. I want your son to understand that actions have consequences. That privilege isn't a license for cruelty. That the girl he chose to torment has more power behind her than he ever dreamed. And our contracts will be reviewed based on your family's commitment to educational reform. The message was clear: shape up or disappear. That evening, Junho sat in his Gangnam apartment, staring at his father's text. "We need to talk. Your behavior has jeopardized everything." His hands shook as he poured another glass of soju, his mind racing through the implications. An American girl had brought his family to its knees without lifting a finger. How was that possible? His phone buzzed, a video message from an unknown number. The footage was grainy, clearly from some kind of security camera. It showed a young Korean man, barely more than a boy, being chased through the streets of what looked like an American college town. The timestamp read, November 15th, 1988. The boy stumbled, fell. 3 figures surrounded him, their faces obscured but their intent clear. A brick flew through the air. Then another figure entered the frame, a young black man who threw himself between the attackers and their victim. The image quality was poor, but Junho could make out the moment when the rescue became a beating, when the savior became a victim. The video ended with both young men on the ground, the black man crawling toward his Korean counterpart, leaving a trail of blood. A text followed. Ann Arbor, Michigan, 1988. Some debts can only be repaid through generations. Junho's phone slipped from his numb fingers. The soju burned in his throat as understanding crashed over him like a tidal wave. The girl he'd humiliated wasn't just some exchange student. She was the daughter of the man who'd saved Chairman Kim's life, Korea's most powerful businessman, the Shadow King who could make or break fortunes with a whisper. And he'd made her his enemy. Across the city, Kendra was having dinner with Minji at a small restaurant near campus. The kimchi was too spicy, the soju too strong, but the conversation was exactly what she needed. "You're different tonight," Minji observed, picking at her bulgogi. "Less tense. I talked to my father. He helped me understand some things. About your mysterious protector?" Kendra nodded, thinking of her father's voice, thick with emotion and memory. There are connections I didn't know about, friendships that go back decades. In Korea, old friendships are sacred, Minji said seriously, especially ones forged in hardship. If someone powerful considers your father a brother, she shrugged, that makes you untouchable. I don't want to be untouchable. I want to be respected for my own merits. Respect is earned, but protection? Minji raised her soju glass. Sometimes protection is a gift. The smart person accepts it gracefully and uses it to build something better. They drank to that, two young women navigating a world that seemed designed to limit their dreams. Neither noticed the man at the corner table, his face hidden behind a menu, his gold Parker pen catching the restaurant's warm light. When they left an hour later, he made another phone call. She's stronger than we anticipated, and the SEO girl is a good influence. Intelligence and character. Marcus raised her well. Chairman Kim's voice carried across the line. What about the boy? Terrified. His father delivered the message about educational reform, but I think the video was more effective. Good. Fear teaches faster than kindness, but not too much fear. We want reformation, not destruction. And the girl? When will you reveal yourself? Kim was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photograph on his desk. Marcus Johnson, graduation day, 1989. His American brother, grinning despite the bandages still visible on his knuckles from the night he'd saved a stranger's life. When she's ready, when the lesson is complete, some gifts must be earned, even by those we love. The next morning brought news that rippled through Hanshin University like an earthquake. Lee Holdings had announced a new diversity initiative, including full scholarships for underrepresented students and mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all executives. Junho was notably absent from classes. In her tiny apartment, Kendra read the news with growing amazement. Change was happening. Real change, systematic change. But the price was becoming clearer. She was no longer just a student. She was a catalyst, a weapon in someone else's war for justice. The question was whether she was ready for the battle ahead. Because if the past few days had taught her anything, it was that in Korea, every action had consequences, every gesture carried weight, and some debts took generations to settle. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. The Marcus Foundation would like to invite you to an exclusive dinner next Friday. Formal attire required. A car will collect you at 7 p.m. Some conversations can only happen face to face. Kendra's heart hammered as she read the message 3 times. After 37 years of silence, the ghost who'd been protecting her was ready to step into the light. She had no idea that the coming week would test everything she thought she knew about justice, family, and the price of power. The real game was about to begin. Junho's investigation began in the most unlikely place, his grandmother's attic in the family compound in Gangnam. If Chairman Kim's story was true, if the connection to Marcus Johnson ran as deep as implied, there would be evidence. His family kept everything: business records, newspaper clippings, photographs spanning 3 generations of Lee Holdings' rise to power. The attic smelled of mothballs and secrets. Dusty boxes lined the walls, each one labeled with dates and contents in his grandmother's precise handwriting. He found what he was looking for in a box marked 1988-1990 International Ventures. Inside, contracts, correspondence, and a folder marked Kim Holdings, Partnership Proposals, Declined. Junho's hands trembled as he opened the folder. The letters inside told a story he'd never known. In 1989, a young Kim Tae-min had approached Lee Holdings with a proposal for a joint venture in semiconductors. The response from Junho's grandfather had been brutal in its dismissal. "We regret to inform you that Lee Holdings does not engage in partnerships with individuals whose background might reflect poorly on our corporate image. We suggest you seek opportunities more suited to your particular circumstances." The letterhead bore the Lee Holdings logo, but the signature was his grandfather's personal seal. The rejection wasn't just business. It was personal, cultural, vicious. A handwritten note was stapled to the back. "Foreign-educated upstart thinks his American degree makes him Korean? Some people forget where they come from." Junho sank onto a dusty crate, the implications crashing over him like an avalanche. His family hadn't just rejected Kim Tae-min's business proposal. They'd rejected him as a person. And now, 34 years later, that rejection had come full circle. Meanwhile, across Seoul, Kendra was having her own revelation in the Hanshin University Library's digital archives. Minji had convinced her to dig deeper into the Marcus Foundation, to understand the pattern of students it helped. "Look at this," Minji whispered, her laptop screen glowing in the library's muted lighting. Every recipient of Marcus Foundation scholarships went on to positions of significant influence. The Thai student who was discriminated against? She's now Thailand's Minister of Trade. The Nigerian whose thesis was sabotaged? She runs the African Development Bank. Kendra scrolled through the list, her amazement growing. It's like someone is deliberately creating a network of leaders who understand discrimination firsthand. More than that, Minji continued, look at the timing. Each scholarship was awarded right after a public incident of prejudice or academic sabotage, almost like someone was watching, waiting for the exact moment these students needed help most. The pattern was too precise to be coincidental. Someone with vast resources and infinite patience had been playing a long game, identifying promising students who faced systemic barriers and quietly ensuring their success. Minji, Kendra said slowly. What if the foundation isn't just about helping individual students? What if it's about changing the entire global power structure? Her friend looked up from the screen, eyes wide with understanding. You think your mysterious protector is building an army of leaders who owe him their careers? Not an army, a family. People who understand what it means to be underestimated, who know the value of real merit over inherited privilege. That afternoon, Professor Park approached Kendra after her international economics seminar, his expression uncharacteristically bold. Miss Johnson? A word? They walked to his office in silence, but this time, when he closed the door, Park didn't retreat behind his desk. Instead, he turned to face her directly. I owe you an apology, and an explanation. Kendra waited, sensing that whatever came next would change everything. 35 years ago, I was a graduate student at Seoul National University. My advisor was a man named Dr. Lim. Brilliant, but traditional in the worst ways. Park's hand shook slightly as he poured tea. A Korean-American student joined our program, Kim Tae-min. He'd been studying in the United States, came back with ideas that challenged everything Dr. Lim believed about Korean business culture. Park's voice grew quieter. Dr. Lim made Kim's life hell. Public humiliations, sabotaged research, impossible standards. I watched it happen and said nothing. I was a coward then, just as I've been a coward now. What happened to Kim? He disappeared for 6 months. Rumors said he'd dropped out, gone back to America, but when he returned, Park shook his head in wonder. He was different, harder, more determined. Within 5 years, he'd built his first company. Within 10, he was untouchable. Kendra felt the pieces clicking together. Professor, are you saying... I'm saying that Kim Tae-min learned early that the system won't change itself, so he built his own system. one where merit matters more than bloodline, where loyalty is earned through character rather than inheritance. That evening, Junho made a decision that would have shocked his grandfather's ghost. He called the number that had sent him the video, the anonymous contact who seemed to know more about his family's secrets than he did. "I want to meet," he said when the call connected. "I need to understand what you want from me." The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m. The cafe on Hongdae Street where your grandfather used to eat lunch. Come alone." The line went dead, leaving Junho staring at his phone. His grandfather's favorite cafe. How could a stranger possibly know that detail? That night, Kendra barely slept. The formal dinner invitation from the Marcus Foundation lay on her desk like a loaded weapon. In less than 3 days, she would finally meet the phantom who'd been reshaping her life from the shadows. She pulled out her phone and dialed her father's number. "Daddy? I need you to tell me everything about Seoul, about your Korean friend, about why someone I've never met is willing to go to war for me." Marcus Johnson was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades. "Baby girl, some stories can only be told face to face. But I'll tell you this. The man who saved my life in Korea became the brother I chose. And when brothers make promises, they keep them across oceans and generations." "What kind of promise?" "That the children we raised would inherit a better world than the one that tried to break us." As Kendra hung up, she realized that Friday's dinner wouldn't just be a meeting, it would be a reckoning. The convergence of past and present, of debt and honor, of justice too long delayed. In his Gangnam penthouse, Chairman Kim stared out at Seoul's glittering skyline, the city he'd conquered through will and strategy. In his hand, he held the same photograph that had sustained him through every battle. Marcus Johnson, bloodied but smiling, on a hospital bed in Ann Arbor. Some debts, he thought, were the greatest honors of all. The dinner was 3 days away, but the real feast, of truth, of justice, of love that transcended every boundary, was about to begin. The cafe on Hongdae Street was a relic from Seoul's past. Worn wooden tables, the smell of hand-ground coffee, and memories layered like dust on every surface. Junho arrived early, choosing a table near the window where his grandfather used to hold court with other chaebol patriarchs, making deals that shaped Korea's economic future. At exactly 3 p.m., a woman entered. Mid-40s, elegant in an understated way, with the kind of quiet authority that suggested power exercised rather than displayed. She ordered tea and approached his table. "Lee Junho?" He nodded, studying her face for clues. Nothing. Professional anonymity perfected into an art form. "I represent certain interests concerned with your family's recent difficulties." She sat across from him, her movements precise. "My employer believes in second chances, but only for those willing to earn them." "What does he want?" "Education. Real education. Not the kind your elite universities provide, but the kind that comes from understanding consequences." She slid a tablet across the table. "This is Kendra Johnson's academic record from UCLA. Perfect scores, leadership positions, research that earned international recognition. She came to Korea not as some diversity experiment, but as one of the brightest minds of her generation." Junho scrolled through the achievements, each one a knife twist of recognition. While he'd coasted on his family name, this American girl had been building herself into a force of nature. "She didn't need protection," the woman continued. "She needed opportunity. Your behavior denied her that opportunity. My employer intends to correct that imbalance. By destroying my family? By teaching your family that real power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down." The woman's smile was polite and terrifying. "You have a choice, Mr. Lee. Evolution or extinction." She stood to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Lee? The video you received was just the beginning. My employer has documentation of every slight, every discrimination, every act of privilege your family has ever committed. The question is whether you're ready to write a better ending to your story." Alone at the table, Junho stared at Kendra's achievements until the screen blurred. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of his own mediocrity. That same afternoon, Kendra received an unexpected visitor in her apartment. Minji stood at her door, face flushed from running, clutching a manila envelope. "You need to see this, now." Inside the envelope, photographs, dozens of them, spanning what looked like several decades. The images told a story of systematic discrimination, Korean students being harassed at American universities, American exchange students facing hostile treatment in Seoul, a cycle of prejudice that fed on itself like a cancer. But in the center of the collection was a photograph that stopped Kendra's heart. Her father, maybe 22 years old, helping a young Korean man who was clearly beaten and bleeding. The timestamp read, Ann Arbor, Michigan, November 15th, 1988. "Where did you get these?" "They were slipped under my dorm room door with a note." Minji's voice was shaking. "Some truths," she read from a piece of expensive paper, "require proper context. Friday's dinner will complete the story." Kendra sank into her desk chair, the photograph trembling in her hands. Her father looked so young, so brave, his face set with the kind of determination she recognized in her own mirror. "Minji, what if everything I thought I knew about my life is wrong?" "What do you mean?" "What if I'm not here because of my academic merit? What if I'm here because of some 35-year-old debt? What if none of my achievements matter because I'm just a pawn in someone else's game of revenge?" Minji sat on the bed, studying her friend's anguished expression. "Kendra, look at that photo again. Really look at it." She did, focusing past her father's youth to his expression. Not duty, not obligation, but choice. Pure, conscious choice to do what was right, regardless of cost. "Your father didn't help that Korean student because he had to," Minji said gently. "He did it because of who he is. And if someone is protecting you now, it's not just about repaying a debt. It's about recognizing the same character in you." That evening, Professor Park made a decision that had been 35 years in the making. He called Chairman Kim's office directly. "I need to speak with him about Kendra Johnson, about Seoul National University in 1988, about my cowardice then, and my determination to do better now." The assistant put him through immediately, as if the call had been expected. "Professor Park." Kim's voice was warm, almost amused. "I wondered when you would find the courage to call." "Sir, I need you to know that what happened to you in our graduate program was wrong. I was wrong to stay silent. And if you're protecting Miss Johnson because of what her father did for you—" "Professor," Kim interrupted gently, "I'm not protecting Kendra Johnson because of her father. I'm protecting her because she reminds me of who I was, brilliant, determined, and facing a system designed to break her spirit. Marcus Johnson saved my life, yes. But more than that, he taught me that integrity isn't inherited. It's chosen, every single day, in moments when no one else is watching." Park felt tears he'd held back for decades finally falling. "Sir, what can I do? Be the professor you always had the potential to be. Defend merit over privilege. Choose courage over comfort. And on Friday night, when Miss Johnson finally understands who she really is, be ready to stand with her." Across Seoul, Jun-ho was having his own moment of reckoning in his family's ancestral shrine room, surrounded by portraits of Lee Holdings' patriarchs. His great-grandfather, who'd collaborated with the Japanese occupation. His grandfather, who'd built their fortune on government contracts and insider information. His father, who maintained power through connections rather than innovation. What had any of them actually built? What legacy beyond accumulated wealth and inherited privilege? He thought about Kendra Johnson's research, her genuine insights into market opportunities his family's experts had missed. He thought about her dignity under fire, her refusal to back down despite being completely outnumbered. His phone buzzed, a text from his father. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. The Kim situation has escalated. Jun-ho stared at the message, understanding that tomorrow would determine whether Lee Holdings evolved or died. But more than that, it would determine who he chose to become. Friday was 2 days away. The dinner that would reveal all secrets, settle all debts, and determine whether justice was truly possible in a world built on inherited power. In her apartment, Kendra tried on the formal dress she'd bought for the Marcus Foundation dinner, looking at herself in the mirror and wondering if the young woman staring back was truly ready for whatever truth awaited her. Some conversation, she knew, changed everything. And there was no going back from understanding who you really are. The game was nearly over. The real test was about to begin. The emergency board meeting at Lee Holdings took place in the same conference room where 3 generations of family patriarchs had made decisions that shaped Korea's economic landscape. This time, the atmosphere was funeral quiet, heavy with the weight of potential destruction. Lee Dong-wook sat at the head of the mahogany table, surrounded by executives whose careers depended on the family's continued dominance. Financial reports lay scattered like autumn leaves, everyone showing devastating losses. The situation is untenable, the CFO reported, his voice strained. 18 major contracts canceled or transferred to competitors. Stock value down 37%. If this continues, we'll be filing for bankruptcy within 6 months. Dong-wook finished grimly. His eyes found his son across the table. All because of a classroom incident that should have been forgotten within a week. Jun-ho straightened in his chair. 3 days ago, he would have deflected, blamed others, hidden behind privilege. Today, he felt the weight of every choice that had led them here. Father, it wasn't just a classroom incident. It was systematic cruelty directed at someone whose only crime was being different from us. The room went deadly silent. In Korean corporate culture, such direct challenge to paternal authority was tantamount to revolution. Are you defending her? His father's voice was ice. I'm accepting responsibility for my actions and their consequences. Jun-ho pulled out his phone, displaying the photograph of his grandfather's rejection letter to young Kim Tae-min. This isn't about one American girl. This is about 34 years of arrogance, of treating people like their worth is determined by their bloodline. An older board member, his grandfather's contemporary, studied the photograph with growing recognition. That Kim, the one we rejected in '89, became Chairman Kim Tae-min, the man who now controls 40% of South Korea's economic infrastructure. Jun-ho's voice carried a gravity beyond his years. We didn't just reject a business proposal. We created our own destroyer. That evening, Kendra sat in her apartment, surrounded by the photographs Minji had received. Each image told part of a larger story. American students facing hostility in Korean universities, Korean students experiencing racism in American schools, a cycle of prejudice that seemed designed to perpetuate itself. But at the center of it all was the photograph of her father and the wounded Korean student, a moment of pure moral courage that had somehow created ripples lasting decades. Her phone rang. her father's number. "Daddy, I need the whole truth. About Seoul, about your Korean friend, about why my life here feels like it was orchestrated before I was even born." Marcus Johnson's sigh carried across the Pacific like a prayer. "Baby girl, some truths are gifts, and some gifts come with prices you can't imagine paying. Tell me anyway." November 15th, 1988. I was walking back from the library when I heard shouting. 3 local boys had cornered this Korean kid, calling him names I won't repeat. They had a brick, Kendra. They were going to kill him for the crime of being foreign. Kendra closed her eyes, seeing the scene her father painted with words. I could have walked away. Should have, maybe. It wasn't my fight, wasn't my problem. But when I looked at that boy on the ground, Marcus's voice broke slightly. I saw every kid who'd ever been bullied for being different. I saw myself at 12, getting called names on the playground. I saw you, even though you weren't born yet, facing the same hate in some future I couldn't imagine. So you helped him. I tried to help him. Got my ass kicked for it too. Spent 3 days in the hospital, missed my midterm exams, thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Taemin, that was his name, came to see me every day. Brought food his host family made, helped me study, became the brother I never had. When I graduated and came home, we promised to stay in touch. But life got in the way, you know. I got married, started my career, had you. He was building his empire in Seoul. Kendra felt pieces clicking together. But you never lost touch completely. He sent a card when you were born. Another when your mother died. When you got accepted to Hanshin University. Marcus paused. I called him. Asked him to watch out for you. Not to interfere, just to make sure you were safe. And when I was humiliated in that classroom, he called me that night. I've never heard a man cry like that, Kendra. Not from sadness, from rage. 34 years later, he was that beaten kid on the Ann Arbor street. And you were the daughter he never had, facing the same cruelty that nearly destroyed him. The conversation continued for another hour, her father filling in gaps that explained so much. The Marcus Foundation wasn't just charity. It was systematic change, creating a network of leaders who understood discrimination intimately and were positioned to prevent it for future generations. He's not protecting you because he owes me, Marcus concluded. He's protecting you because you represent the future he's been fighting to create. A world where merit matters more than birthright, where character counts more than color. After they hung up, Kendra sat in her darkened apartment, understanding finally dawning. Tomorrow's dinner wouldn't just be a meeting. It would be the completion of a story that began with a single act of courage on a Michigan street 35 years ago. Across Seoul, in his glass tower penthouse, Chairman Kim Tae-min prepared for a conversation he'd been rehearsing in his mind for decades. On his desk lay 2 items: the faded photograph of himself and Marcus in the hospital, and a more recent picture of Kendra at her UCLA graduation. 2 generations, 1 debt of honor, and tomorrow, the chance to transform past pain into future possibility. His phone buzzed. A message from his security team. Lee Jun-ho has requested a personal meeting. He wants to apologize directly to Miss Johnson. Kim smiled, the expression transforming his austere features. Perhaps some people were capable of evolution after all. The dinner was less than 24 hours away. The final act of a drama that had been building since 1988 was about to unfold. Justice, Kim had learned, wasn't always swift, but it was, ultimately, inevitable. Kendra couldn't sleep. Tomorrow's dinner with the Marcus Foundation, with Chairman Kim she now knew, loomed like a mountain she wasn't sure she was ready to climb. At 2 a.m., she gave up on rest and pulled on her jacket, heading for the one place in Seoul that never failed to clear her mind, the Han River Walkway. The city looked different at night, softer, more forgiving, as if darkness could smooth over the sharp edges of class and culture that defined daylight interactions. She walked slowly, her footsteps echoing off the concrete, processing everything her father had told her. She wasn't alone. Can't sleep either? Kendra spun to find Junho emerging from the shadows near a riverside bench. He looked terrible, haggard, worn down, like a man who'd been wrestling with demons and losing. What are you doing here? Same as you, I think, trying to understand how we got to this point. He gestured to an empty bench. Can we talk? Really talk, without the games and the posturing? Against her better judgment, Kendra sat down, maintaining careful distance between them. I know about your father and Chairman Kim, Junho said quietly. I know about 1988, about what Marcus Johnson did, about the debt my family has been trying to ignore for 34 years. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they wanted to cross. I also know, he continued, that tomorrow night, you're going to meet the most powerful man in Korea. And when you do, my family's fate will be decided by what you say about me. Kendra studied his profile in the dim streetlight. Why should I say anything good about you? You made my first month here a living hell. You shouldn't. I don't deserve it. His voice was raw with honesty. But I need you to know that I understand now. What I did wasn't just bullying. It was perpetuating a system that decides human worth based on appearance and origin. A system that nearly destroyed the man who now holds my family's future in his hands. They sat in silence, watching the river flow toward the Yellow Sea, carrying with it the history and pain and possibility of two nations connected by more than either wanted to admit. Junho, Kendra said finally, what did you think when you looked at me in that classroom? He winced as if she'd struck him. Honestly, I thought you didn't belong. I thought you were there because of some diversity quota, that your presence somehow diminished the value of everyone else's achievements. And now I know that everything I've achieved has been handed to me. My admission to Hanshin, my father's business connections, my future CEO position, none of it was earned. While he turned to face her fully. You built yourself from nothing. UCLA valedictorian, published researcher, fluent in 3 languages. You're everything I pretended to be. A late-night jogger passed them, earbuds blocking out the world, oblivious to the conversation that was reshaping 2 young lives beside the ancient river. There's something else, Junho said. Something I need to tell you before tomorrow night. My family, we're not just victims in this. We helped create the system that tried to break Kim Tae-min. My grandfather's rejection letter, the casual cruelty, the assumption that Koreanness is determined by purity rather than character. He pulled out his phone, showing her documents he'd spent days uncovering. Lee Holdings has a history of discrimination against returned students, against mixed-race employees, against anyone who challenges our narrow definition of belonging. What happened to you isn't an aberration. It's our legacy. Kendra scrolled through the evidence, each document a weight added to the scales of justice. Why are you showing me this? Because tomorrow night, when Chairman Kim asks you what justice looks like, you'll have all the information you need to make that decision. Junho stood, his movements careful as if he were made of broken glass. I can't undo what I did to you, but I can make sure you have the power to choose what happens next. And if I choose to destroy your family, his smile was sad but genuine, then maybe that's what needs to happen. Maybe some systems can only be changed through complete destruction. After he left, Kendra remained by the river until dawn, watching the city wake up around her. Delivery trucks rumbling through empty streets, early commuters heading to jobs that would define their worth, the eternal cycle of Seoul preparing for another day of hierarchies and hidden wars. Her phone buzzed at 6 a.m., a text from an unknown number. Tonight, at dinner, you'll be asked to choose between justice and mercy. Remember that the greatest leaders understand these aren't opposites. They're partners in creating change that lasts. Your father taught me that lesson. Now it's your turn to teach it to the world. The restaurant was a study in understated power. Traditional Korean architecture melded with modern luxury. The kind of place where Korea's elite made decisions that shaped millions of lives. Private rooms lined mahogany corridors, each one containing conversations worth billions of won. Chairman Kim led Kendra to the innermost sanctum, a room overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The table was set for two, each piece of tableware positioned with mathematical precision according to Korean formal dining protocol. "Miss Johnson," he said, gesturing for her to sit. 34 years ago, your father saved more than my life. He saved my faith in humanity." Kendra took her seat, noting how he waited for her to be settled before sitting himself, a small gesture that spoke of deep respect. "He never told me the full story until recently. Marcus was always humble about his heroism." Kim poured tea with practiced grace, the ceremony giving them both time to adjust to the magnitude of their meeting. "May I ask what he did tell you?" "That you were both young, both far from home, both facing hatred for being different. That when you needed help, he chose to act instead of walking away." Kim nodded, his eyes distant with memory. "I was bleeding on a street in Ann Arbor, convinced I would die alone in a foreign country. Then this young black man appeared, someone who had every reason to fear the same violence I was experiencing. But instead of self-preservation, he chose solidarity." The first course arrived. Traditional Korean soup served in mother-of-pearl bowls. Kim waited for Kendra to begin, following the proper etiquette, even in this most personal of conversations. "Your father carried me to the hospital," he continued after they'd both tasted the soup. "Stayed while they stitched my scalp, gave blood when I needed a transfusion. But more than that, he made me understand that strength isn't about standing above others. It's about lifting them up. Is that why you created the Marcus Foundation?" Kim's smile was gentle but fierce. "The foundation is my attempt to systematize the lesson your father taught me. Every student we help represents someone who might have been broken by a system that values conformity over character. Instead, they become leaders who understand the true price of prejudice." Kendra set down her spoon, meeting his gaze directly. "And what about the Lee family? What lesson are they supposed to learn from having their empire destroyed?" "Ah." Kim leaned back, studying her with approval. "Now we reach the heart of tonight's conversation. Tell me, Miss Johnson, what do you believe justice looks like?" The question hung between them like a challenge and an invitation. Kendra thought of Jun-ho by the river, broken by understanding his own mediocrity. Of Professor Park, finding courage after decades of cowardice. Of her father, choosing principle over safety on a Michigan street. "Justice," she said slowly, "isn't about punishment. It's about transformation." The Lee family's destruction wouldn't change the system that created them, but their redemption might. Kim's eyes lit up with something approaching pride. "Elaborate." "Jun-ho showed me documents last night. Evidence of his family's pattern of discrimination going back generations. But he didn't have to do that. He could have hidden the truth, protected his family's reputation. Instead, He chose transparency. And you believe this represents genuine change? I believe it represents the possibility of change, which is more than existed a month ago. Kim nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket and withdrew a manila envelope. Before we continue, there's something you need to see. Inside were photographs, not the historical ones Minji had received, but recent images. Junho at his grandfather's grave, placing flowers and kneeling in traditional mourning posture. Lee Dong-wook at a press conference announcing sweeping reforms at Lee Holdings. Professor Park addressing a faculty meeting about academic integrity. Change, Kim observed, is already happening. Your presence at Hanshin has catalyzed something that decades of external pressure couldn't achieve. The question now is how we nurture that transformation. The main course arrived, beautifully prepared bulgogi with an array of side dishes. As they ate, Kim shared more of his story. The years building his empire while carrying the memory of American racism and Korean rejection. His gradual understanding that power without purpose was just elaborate revenge. I could destroy the Lee family tomorrow, he said matter-of-factly. Cancel their remaining contracts, buy their debt, force them into bankruptcy. It would be satisfying in the short term. But it would also perpetuate the cycle. They would become victims rather than learning to become better victors. And the system that created their prejudice would remain intact, ready to produce the next generation of entitled cruelty. Kendra found herself thinking of her father again, of the choice he'd made to help rather than hurt. So what do you propose? Kim's smile was sharp with possibility. A partnership. Lee Holdings becomes the testing ground for a new model of Korean business, one based on merit rather than bloodline, character rather than connections. Junho learns to earn what he's always taken for granted. His father learns that true strength comes from empowering others. And if they refuse, then they face the consequences of that choice. But I suspect, Kim's expression grew thoughtful, that recent events have made them very receptive to alternative approaches. As if summoned by their conversation, Kim's phone buzzed. He glanced at the message and smiled. Speaking of alternatives, it seems young Mr. Lee has requested permission to address you directly. He's waiting outside if you're willing to hear what he has to say. Kendra felt her heart accelerate. This dinner had been scripted from the beginning, not manipulated, but orchestrated to create the possibility of genuine reconciliation. Send him in. Junho entered the private dining room like a man walking to his execution. Gone was the arrogant Chibol heir who'd humiliated her in that classroom. In his place stood someone older, humbled by understanding the true cost of privilege. He bowed deeply to Chairman Kim, then turned to Kendra. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its former condescension. Miss Johnson, I owe you an apology that goes far beyond words. What I did in Professor Park's classroom wasn't just personal cruelty. It was the perpetuation of a system that has caused immeasurable harm to countless people. Kendra studied his face, looking for signs of performance, of strategic manipulation. Instead, she saw genuine anguish. I've spent the last week investigating my family's history, he continued. The contracts we've lost, the businesses we've damaged, the lives we've diminished because we believed that Korean identity was something that could be owned rather than earned. He pulled out a folder, placing it on the table between them. These are proposals for structural changes at Lee Holdings. Diversity initiatives, mentorship programs for international students, partnerships with organizations fighting discrimination. Not charity, investment in building the kind of company Korea deserves. Chairman Kim remained silent, letting the moment unfold organically. This was between the two young people whose confrontation had started everything. Why should I believe this is real? Kendra asked. How do I know this isn't just damage control? Junho's laugh was bitter. Because damage control would be easier. I could have stayed silent, let my father handle the politics, waited for this to blow over. Instead, I'm here, acknowledging that everything I thought I knew about merit and belonging was wrong. He sat down without being invited, a breach of etiquette that somehow felt more honest than perfect manners. Kendra, you came to Korea with achievements I couldn't match if I had 10 lifetimes. UCLA valedictorian, published researcher, fluent in languages I struggle with despite expensive tutors. But instead of recognizing excellence, I saw difference. Instead of learning from strength, I tried to diminish it. And now? Now I want to learn. From you, from Chairman Kim, from anyone willing to teach me how to be better than the system that created me. His hands shook slightly as he spoke. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm hoping I might earn the chance to prove that change is possible. Kendra looked at Chairman Kim, seeing approval in his subtle nod. This was what justice looked like. Not destruction, but transformation. Not punishment, but growth. Junho, she said carefully. Apologies are just words. What matters is what you do next. I know. That's why I've already started. He opened the folder, revealing detailed plans. Lee Holdings will establish the Marcus Johnson Scholarship, full funding for international students facing discrimination. We're partnering with universities across Asia to create support networks. And we're restructuring our hiring practices to prioritize merit over connections. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. The family that had once rejected Kim Tae-min for his foreign education now sought redemption through programs that would prevent future Kim Tae-mins from facing the same barriers. There's one more thing, Junho said, reaching into his jacket. He withdrew a vintage gold Parker pen, identical to the one Kendra carried, identical to the one Chairman Kim kept as a talisman of friendship. This belonged to my great-grandfather. It's been passed down through 3 generations of Lee patriarchs. I want you to have it. Kendra stared at the pen, understanding the gesture's significance. In Korean culture, family heirlooms represented continuity, honor, the sacred connection between past and future. I can't accept this. Please. His voice was quiet but firm. Let it represent something new. Not the old hierarchies that divided us, but the possibility of building something better together. Chairman Kim watched the exchange with satisfaction. The pen, gold Parker, like the ones that connected him to Marcus Johnson, like the one Kendra carried as a reminder of her father's love, would become a symbol of transformation rather than tradition. Kendra took the pen, feeling its weight. This doesn't erase what happened. No, Junho agreed. But maybe it can help write a better ending. 6 months later, Kendra stood at the podium in the same classroom where her humiliation had begun. But this time, the atmosphere was electric with possibility rather than hostility. Her presentation on cultural bridge building and international business drew nods of appreciation from professors and students alike. In the front row sat Junho, taking notes with the intensity of someone making up for lost time. Beside him, Minji captured every slide for the cultural exchange program she now directed. Professor Park introduced the Q&A session with visible pride. Miss Johnson's research has been accepted by the Harvard Business Review and will be published next month. Her work on cross-cultural business strategies is already being implemented by major corporations across Asia. The questions that followed were respectful, engaged, genuinely curious about her insights rather than challenging her right to have them. When a junior student asked about overcoming discrimination in academic settings, Kendra's answer drew from hard-won wisdom. Change, she said, happens when we choose to see difference as strength rather than threat. When we recognize that excellence comes in many forms, and that our own growth depends on learning from perspectives unlike our own. After the presentation, Chairman Kim waited in the hallway, his presence no longer hidden but openly acknowledged as Kendra's mentor and surrogate family. "Your father would be proud," he said simply. "He is proud. I talked to him this morning. He's flying in next week to see the new Marcus Johnson Center at Hanshin University. The center, funded jointly by Kim Holdings and a reformed Lee Holdings, provided support services for international students, cultural competency training for faculty, and research opportunities that bridged academic excellence with social justice." "And the Lee family?" Kendra smiled, gesturing toward Junho, who was deep in conversation with students about the mentorship program he'd helped establish. "Transformation is a process, but I think we're seeing real change." It was true. Lee Holdings had become a model for ethical business practices in Korea, their diversity initiatives earning international recognition. Junho had spent the summer working in Marcus Johnson's Los Angeles firm, learning business practices that prioritized people over profit margins. "There's something I want to show you," Chairman Kim said, leading her toward his car. They drove through Seoul traffic to his office building, taking the private elevator to the executive floor. His office was exactly as she'd imagined: understated luxury, panoramic city views, and photographs chronicling decades of business success. But it was the newest addition that made her breath catch: a group photo of the Marcus Foundation's latest scholarship recipients. 24 students from around the world, all brilliant, all resilient, all ready to change their corners of the universe. 37 students now, Kim said with quiet satisfaction. From 16 countries, studying at universities across Asia. Each one represents a future leader who understands that true power comes from lifting others up. "You're building an army of justice," Kendra observed with amusement. "I prefer to think of it as a family. People connected not by blood, but by shared values and mutual support." He handed her a leather portfolio. "Which brings me to my final request." Inside the portfolio, an offer letter from Kim Holdings, a position as Director of International Development with a mandate to expand the Marcus Foundation globally. The salary was staggering, but more important was the opportunity to systematize the lessons learned from her own experience, to create change on a scale that could reshape how business was conducted across cultures. "I'm honored," she said carefully, "but I'm not sure I'm ready for this level of responsibility." "Miss Johnson," Kim's smile was warm with affection and respect, "you've been ready since the day you chose to stand up in that classroom and present your research despite facing hostility. The question is whether you're ready to help others find the same courage." That evening, Kendra called her father from the Han River walkway, where her transformation had begun. Seoul glittered around her, no longer foreign but familiar, no longer hostile but welcoming. "Daddy, I think I understand now why you saved Chairman Kim all those years ago. Tell me, baby girl." It wasn't just about helping one person. It was about believing that individuals can change systems, that single acts of courage create ripples that last generations. Marcus Johnson's laughter carried across the Pacific. "That's my brilliant daughter, so what are you going to do?" Kendra looked out over the city that had tested her, broken her down, and built her back up stronger. In her pocket, she carried 2 gold Parker pens now, her father's, representing the love that had sustained her, and Junho's, representing the possibility of redemption. "I'm going to change the world," she said simply. "One student, one business, one act of justice at a time." 3 months later, the Harvard Business Review published her groundbreaking article, The Marcus Model: Transforming Corporate Culture Through Strategic Empathy. It became required reading at business schools across 3 continents. But more importantly, it told a story that needed telling. How 34 years after a young black man saved a beaten Korean student on a Michigan street, their children had found a way to turn past pain into future possibility. Justice, Kendra had learned, wasn't about punishment. It was about transformation. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave, you got to be part of writing a better ending to stories that began in darkness. The Marcus Foundation continued to grow, its scholars scattered across the globe like seeds of change. Each one carried the same lesson that Marcus Johnson had taught Kim Tae-min, that Kim had taught Kendra, that she was now teaching the world. True power isn't about standing above others, it's about lifting them up. And some debts of honor, paid forward across generations, become the foundation stones of a more just world. Some friendships transcend time and distance. Some acts of courage echo across decades. And sometimes, if we're very fortunate, we get to be part of the symphony they create. A harmony built from understanding, respect, and the radical belief that everyone deserves the chance to belong.